Welcome to our first webinar in Striving Towards Success in Mainstream Schools. Over the past several years, Aladani and Uma, we have been working with professionals and families in India and around the world. And one topic that comes up as a stressor, as something to worry about, is preparing children for the mainstreaming and making sure they are successful once they are in the mainstream. So our team has put together our 20 years of experience to bring you this webinar series and several associated resources. We want to thank Butte Creek Foundation for their support in hosting this series. So without further ado, we'll get started. Success in the mainstream is a large topic, and today we are going to start this conversation, and I hope we will continue it over the rest of the year. We expect to present a series of webinars. We hope that you will continue this conversation with your families and teams as well, and we welcome your feedback. There will be a survey at the end for you to participate in and share. So all mainstream related thinking starts with the primary question: is the child ready for mainstream? This is a big question, and we've done a previous webinar related to that. And we encourage you to go and watch it. If you received a link to the session today, the link for this webinar has been included in that. So I'm going to go through the decision-making process really quickly, but go and watch the previous webinar. Very simply, we are thinking, what is the child's current functioning level and growth trajectory? How is the child making progress? What are the desired outcomes? Depending on the child's growth trajectory, whether the child is keeping up or catching up or moving up compared to other children, what supports does my child need? Does my child need more speech language therapy? Does my child need more instruction in reading? Do we need to work on listening? Whatever those supports might be. Now, who and where are these supports going to be available? Is this going to happen in the school? Is this going to be after school at a center, at a school? Is this going to be a special education teacher at the school, shadow teacher, whatever that is? What are my child's rights within the state and country's special education laws? In India, between the RPWD and Right to Education and the National Education Policy, there is a lot happening around children with disabilities participating in mainstream schools. So be thinking about that, and not every school is going to be aware of it. So what is it that you need to advocate for the child? This is all the thinking that is going into making a decision. Is the child ready for mainstreaming? Sometimes the answer is yes, the child is ready for mainstreaming. Sometimes the answer is no, not yet. Maybe we need to go to a special school for a few years. Maybe we need to delay starting preschool by a year and anything in between. And I know there is a lot of pressure to, join school at the right age, but the choice that's right for your child is the right decision. So, be thinking about that as you are making these choices. This list of questions is for parents to think about and the professionals to help parents think through. All right. So after thinking this, say the decision is that the child is ready for mainstreaming. Then the next part is choosing the school. Choosing the right school will make a big difference. Notice that once the school is chosen, there are many different aspects that we have to consider when it comes to being successful in the mainstream. Notice that we put all of these issues in a circle because they are interconnected and they change over time. Another way to think about this is, many of you have seen this chart before. Intervention needs of children who are deaf and hard of hearing are changing over their lifetime, right? In various domains: listening, language literacy, academics, social skills, self-advocacy, family engagement, as well as communication. Typically, School starts at the 3-4 year, around that age. Notice all the other things, all the other achievements, skills that children have to learn, and it could be difficult for them to learn because they have a hearing loss. And it is then important for us to be thinking about what are the supports needed, right? They might not need a lot of help, but they might need monitoring. So be thinking about what that long-term process is, not just a year of therapy after the implant. Receiving services across the school time is important to develop skills in all areas. Our focus today is partnering with the school, but we know that there are many topics that you all are interested in. So we will be sending a follow-up survey so that you can share the information. Partnering with schools is our main topic. And these are the 5 steps that we think make for a strong partnerships. When we say partnerships, we are referring to the partnership between the parents, the child, the school teacher, and the administration. Without all of these pieces working together, the partnership isn't going to be as strong as it could be. Notice that I'm adding the child here as well, because at some point, it is important that the child is able to speak for themselves, advocate for themselves, and become a part of this partnership. More on that in a future webinar. So the 5 steps we think are choosing the school, approaching the school, giving information to the school, advocating for support, and building the team around the child. How, when, where, why we do this will determine the strength and the effectiveness of this partnership. So we're going to talk about each of these 5 steps next. But before we do that, I want to hear from you. Type in the chat, why do parents want children to attend a mainstream school? If you are a parent, type and tell us why you want your child to attend a mainstream school. If you are a professional, tell us what it is that you hear from parents. What do parents hope the child's school experience will be? And how do we define success in mainstream schools? 3 different questions, really broad answers. So go ahead and type in chat what it is that you are thinking about it. When you type, please make sure you are typing to everyone and not just the hosts and panelists. Or if you just want to send it to us, then just to us. Some responses are starting to come in. I'll paraphrase them as we go. One response so far is so that children can fulfill the job of their dreams, right? Achieve the outcome that they want. Children going to the mainstream so that they don't have to go to a special school where they have to learn sign language to make them independent in life. Parents want the child to function like typical peers, so hearing children, to be happy and independent person in life, to give them more exposure. Parents want children to be as capable as other typical children, adjust with typical children, independent in life, make their own decisions. Parents see their kids being not different from other children. Absolutely. All of these responses indicate that parents want children to be in the mainstream as part of the mainstream class, right? And obviously learning academics is an important aspect of going to school, but you could learn academics anywhere. You could learn academics at home. Why going to the school, right? A term commonly used, at least in Maharashtra, where I have studied, is integrating children in the mainstream. The national education policy in India now focuses on the term inclusive education. And those are the two buzzwords, two keywords that we hear around education of children with disabilities. Dr. Eric Carter of Vanderbilt University proposes that we want to aim for belonging and not just integration and inclusion. So take a look at this image. Exclusion is when children are not invited, not involved in a typical classroom. Segregation is when here are the typical children in the gray and white, and the colorful ones are the children with disabilities, children with hearing loss. Integration is they're all in the same group, but they are still in their own little pockets. Inclusion is when we have children throughout the class in different settings, but belonging is when they feel that they are a part of this group, of this community. So my question to you is, do we see children who are deaf and hard of hearing as a part of the classroom or the school? Do we see that it is the right of children who are deaf and hard of hearing to learn alongside children who are not deaf in a mainstream school? Or do we see their admission to a mainstream school as a favor, as a kindness that is being done to them as well as the family? Think about it, really think about it, because the attitudes that we bring as parents and professionals is what the children are learning and taking from us, is what the mainstream school staff is learning and taking from us. And this is, part one of the partnership. The reality is that even if we envision a classroom where the child really belongs, where the child is really a part of the community, there are some challenges associated with this, right? Getting admissions in schools is not easy. I've heard from several of you in terms of how difficult it is to get a child in a mainstream school. The staff and the leadership might not understand the impact of hearing loss and needs, and that makes it a challenge. There is lots of tension around the safety of the device and any other hearing technology that is used, as well as challenges keeping up with the reading and writing and academics, building friendships, preventing bullying, having a sense of belonging. All of that is a factor. And I wonder, why do we see these challenges? So we are going to flip our thinking and try to think from the perspective of the mainstream teacher. And we have a few in the audience, so I would love for you to share if this is what you are thinking, right? What is the mainstream school staff thinking when they hear, oh, there is a parent who wants admission for their child who is deaf or hard of hearing? Or when they get an email or a phone call from a professional saying, I work with a child who has cochlear implants and they are looking to mainstream, what are they thinking? What are the thoughts that come into their mind? If you feel up to it, type in chat. Anyone can type in chat, not just the mainstream teachers. Extra work, yes, definitely. There is a lack of awareness. Maybe they don't want the extra efforts. Do they even know what that extra work will be? Maybe they do and maybe they don't. I have spent, as part of my job in the US as a teacher of the deaf and a listening and spoken language specialist, I have been a mainstream support teacher for students who got implants at the program I was working at the hospital and then went into their schools. And I was their mainstream support staff for about 10 years. And there is a wide range of emotions that mainstream school staff feels, teachers in the mainstream feel, when they are finding out that they have a student who is deaf or hard of hearing joining their class. Some might feel excited, some might just be confused, some might feel very nervous and overwhelmed, and some might just feel that that's exactly what I was going to say. The point that came up in the chat right now. Fear that they will get blamed if the child doesn't make progress. Whether they're able to do this, whether they're able to support it. So, partnering with the school using the 5 steps that we are going to suggest and anything else that works for you could be a way to really connect with the mainstream staff in school to help them see what is that the child needs and can do and how you all can work as a team. So choosing the school involves choosing the educational environment and the school culture that will be the best fit for the child. Approaching the school is thinking about what is the story you are telling about the child. Educating the school staff is about the information that you are sharing. Advocating for support is figuring out what will the child need to learn in the classroom and building a team around the child with the people who can provide the support and the specialty, the expertise, the lens that they bring. We will share these 5 steps as a handout later on, so know that you will have access to these. In our previous webinar, we've talked about choosing the school, but here are the top pieces, right? We're going to choose a school that is appropriate for the child's current functioning and needs. So we want to choose a school that is going to meet the child where they are. We want to choose a school that is going to make the effort to help the child learn, make it accessible. We're going to talk more about this in a future webinar. We want to choose a school that wants to enroll the child, not has to enroll the child because of law, because of some connections, because of a donation, whatever the reason might be, because they have to fill a quota. We want to choose a school that wants the child. We want to choose a school where the teachers are interested and willing to learn how to support the child. And we want to choose a school that is willing to engage in collaboration and communication with the team, build a partnership. Okay, maybe you all are thinking, Uma, this is all rainbows and unicorns. This is not how the real world works. I hear you. There is no perfect school for a perfect kid. But these are the 5 things that we want to work towards. We want to see how we can get to this point where we are finding the school that is meeting most of these needs. Because ultimately, we want schools that are going to practice the philosophy of inclusion and make sure that the child, that your child or your student is being included. The next step is approaching the school, right? So this is the attitude I was talking about. How are we talking about the child? What is the emotion, the tone hidden in our words? What is the attitude we are modeling? And what information are we giving the school, asking the school, other than the board and the syllabus and the curriculum? So I'm gonna share something that a parent might say, and I want you to type in chat, what is the attitude? What is the emotion? So this parent is maybe, calling up the school and saying, hello, I'm the mother of a 3-year-old cochlear implantee or hearing impaired child. We will be most grateful if you accept my child into your school. What is the attitude here? What is this parent communicating about the child? What is the school hearing about the child? a favor, right? This is a favor that they want. A big favor, yes. There is a request here. All right, let's look at another way of presenting the same information. Hello, I am the mother of 3-year-old Yash, who is curious, creative, and loves dinosaurs. He wears 2 cochlear implants to hear. I have heard good things about your school, and I think my son will be a good match. What is the attitude, emotion in this second dialogue, in this second request? The second one is positive and confident. You are indicating that the child will be a good asset for the school. Absolutely. Our children do add so much by their presence. It is positive. It's really good advocacy on the parents' part. Absolutely. So, in your experience, what do you typically see? The first conversation or the second conversation? What do you typically hear? I'm excited to see that so many of you are hearing the second conversation, because that has not been our experience. We have heard from parents and professionals who are approaching the school because they want a favor, because they talk about the child's hearing loss first and foremost, as opposed to talking about the child as a child. So I am thrilled to hear that so many of you are hearing the second piece of this rather than the first. If you are hearing the first, think about how you can change that script. The second point about what information are we asking the school, it's about, goes back to choosing the school, right? Are we choosing the school because they have a prestigious name and a fancy status, and this is the right school to go for people in a certain circle? Or are we choosing it because they have a certain syllabus and they have a certain school philosophy, and and so on? So that is the other point to consider. Again, some of you might not have a choice here. Some of you might be living in an area where your school choices are really limited, and then you'll go with what you can. But again, thinking about how are we approaching the school, how are we partnering with the school? So here is an example of how we continue to approach the school. Say you've approached the school, you've chosen the school, the child has gotten in, but there is still a lot of tension and concern and consideration around what will happen once the child starts. Here is a sample email, WhatsApp message, letter we encourage families to send to the school. It's a very simple, short email or WhatsApp message. Dear Mrs. Mehta, Mrs. Mehta is the classroom teacher. I am Sumita, Ranjan Verma's mother. Principal Reddy shared your email and asked me to contact you to set up a meeting. I'm excited that Rajan is going to be starting at your school this year. He's looking forward to going to school just like his friends in the building. As you might know, Rajan has bilateral profound hearing loss and wears 2 cochlear implants to help him hear. Since he got his implants 3 years ago, Ranjan and our entire family has worked hard to help him learn to listen and speak. I am happy to share that he has grown to be a chatty boy with a great interest in books, arts, and crafts. I would like to meet with you for 20 to 30 minutes to share some information about Ranjan's hearing devices and how he learns in the classroom. I can also answer any questions you might have about teaching a student who is deaf and wears cochlear implants. I know you haven't met Ranjan as yet, so I'm attaching a short video of him introducing himself. Please let me know what date and time is convenient for you to meet. What do you notice about this email? What do you notice about the tone of this email, the information in this email? I'm waiting for some responses. There they are. This is a confident and positive mother talking about the child. Confident, upbeat, right? Giving information, positive attitude. The strengths of the child are highlighted. Now, I haven't told you yet if Ranjan's speech is good, if he is talking in full sentences, if he can read and write and whatever, right? But if I were a teacher receiving this email, and if I had never seen a kid who is deaf or hard of hearing before, this is going to say to me, oh, okay, this is a mother who's willing to work with me and support me. I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to walk in with an open mind. And at least that's a start. And a big part of this partnership is educating the school staff. Most teachers in mainstream schools have no training or experience in teaching a child who is deaf or hard of hearing and is learning to listen and speak. Most mainstream teachers don't have a lot of training in any kind of special education. Forget low incidence special education. They might have a lot of misconceptions about what a deaf student or a student with special needs or a disabled student will need. And thus, it is important that parents, supported by professionals, provide information about the child, the impact of hearing loss, the child's strengths and needs, and hearing technology to the mainstream staff and teacher. I recently had a chance to do that with a school in India. And I think it's going to make a big difference. I think the teachers and the staff is not feeling as afraid to start working with this child as they would have had they not had a chance to learn some things about this. There are some topics that you need to share information about. So just remember, this is a lot of information. So you don't want to give all the information all at the same time. And you probably have to repeat some of this information. Maybe you have to talk about it. Maybe you have to share a handout. Maybe you have to share a video, whatever that is, right? But these are the topics that are at the top of the list for the school staff. And I'm saying this, having done this for 10 plus years in the US. When we have shared this list with the families in India, we've received positive responses. When we have, the one time I've had a chance to share this with a mainstream group, they've given positive responses. And if you have tried to do this, we would love to hear more from you. So we want to talk a little bit about the hearing technology, because that is generally the biggest tension point, right? What can the child hear with and without the hearing technology? So what do they hear with just their ears? This is a profoundly deaf kid, then pretty much nothing, right? And the teacher needs to know that, so that it's not like, oh, your implants are not working, we'll fix them later today, just take them off. We don't want that to happen. And that might happen if the teacher doesn't know how important this is. What the child can and cannot hear with the hearing technology. Sometimes the perception is, oh, but they have a cochlear implant, they should be able to hear everything. Well, maybe not. Maybe not if it was noisy or if the child wasn't paying attention. And what is the hearing technology the child uses? So we have a little handout called the CI is a tool, which we will make available to all of you. It's also on our website as a blog post right now. but we'll be happy to share it with you so that you can share it with your mainstream teachers. It is best if parents and professionals can work together to develop this. Also, just learning about the hearing technology is necessary, but not sufficient for a mainstream teacher to teach a child who is deaf or hard of hearing. We also need to talk about how does the child communicate? What are strengths and challenges? What are the child's academic skills? How does the child play with others? Whether it's children or adults, can the child ask for help? How does the child ask for help? Are there any points or tips about the behavior that the mainstream teacher should know? For many children who are deaf and hard of hearing, it might look like they're not paying attention, but it might be because they didn't hear you. It might be because they didn't understand you. So before labeling a child as a behavior problem, we have to take into account what the role of hearing loss is. And these are things that mainstream teachers rarely have been taught. It's not their fault that they don't know. This is not what they are taught. So it is up to us to educate the mainstream staff in a way that is fostering partnership, right? They are the experts in one area, and you are, if you're the parent, you are the expert on the child. And if you are the professional, you are the expert on language and literacy and hearing development. So we all have our expertise and we bring it together. The fourth aspect of partnering is advocating for support. We are going to do a much longer webinar on this, but I'll just give you, some highlights. We want to advocate for the use of hearing technology. If the teachers understand why hearing technology is important, it is likely that they're going to use it. We are going to advocate for access. So sitting in a spot that will help the child hear best as well as see clearly is going to be important. For some classrooms, this is the first row, but make sure it's not the first row next to an AC unit or a door or something very noisy or a window, because then what's the point of it, right? It becomes a really noisy place in the classroom. We'll talk more about acoustics and placement in a future session. We want to advocate for support in terms of language learning by introducing or pre-teaching vocabulary and concepts to ensure access to the lessons that are being taught. Say the lesson is about, going to a museum. And if the first time the child hears the word museum in the classroom and they have no idea what that is about, they're going to have a hard time following along and understanding the information. But if you were told ahead of time as the parent or the professional working with the child, hey, in next week, we are going to talk about museums in the classroom. Maybe you can do an activity. Maybe you can watch a video about a museum. Maybe you can go to the museum. Maybe you can make your own museum at home. Whatever that is, can be done in advance so the child doesn't feel like they're falling behind. More on this in a future webinar. This is one of my absolute favorite topics. We want to advocate for support, but not support that is more than necessary, not support that is going to make the child helpless. So in social situations, if one child is talking to another, but the child with hearing loss did not hear, we want the staff to facilitate. We want them to say, hey, did you hear? Your friend was talking to you. Will you tell him again what you said? Rather than, hey, did you hear? He's telling you to go to the next desk. How does that help the child? It doesn't help the child develop skills. Holding children to high and appropriate expectations is incredibly important. And that is something we have to keep advocating for. More on this in a future webinar. And then creating opportunities for engagement and inclusion. Pity and sympathy does not help the child learn. We want to create opportunities where the child can engage and be a part of the group to learn. Sometimes, especially in older standards, older grades, third standard and above, there might be some accommodations that are necessary. Extra time on a test or reading instructions, or checking in to make sure that the child understood the instructions, maybe some modified assignments. Any and all of that can be an important aspect of how we are advocating for support. Again, this is an area where the school might say, oh, that is special treatment. But it's not. It's about ensuring that you are providing the child equal opportunity. Again, more on that in a future webinar. As we were planning this webinar, we were like, oh my gosh, there is so much information. How do we pack it in an hour? So, like I said, think about this as the beginning of a conversation, a year-long conversation that we will have around this topic. Finally, the fifth part of this partnership building is building a team around the child. Who is on the team? What expertise or perspective do they bring? So this is my visualization of the team, right? At the heart of it are the people who are the experts on the child themselves when they grow up, but for now, the parents and the caregivers. We also want someone who's an expert on listening, language, literacy, and academic development. We want someone who's an expert on reading and math. We want an expert on listening and speech and language development. We want an expert on hearing technology and auditory access. These become the technical members of the team. We also want other parents on this team who are a few years ahead and can share their experience and resources, a school that they liked or a special educator that they worked with. We also want other children and young adults, so the child can see what their future might look like. A 5-year-old talking to a 10-year-old who also wears cochlear implants is pretty cool. A 10-year-old talking to a 15-year-old who is getting ready to finish school and go to college and, is exciting. A college student talking to somebody in a new job is exciting because these are the people that are supporting the child, right? We want to build a team for the child, around the child. So there are technical aspects, but there are also real life aspects. Who are these people? Who can help us do all of this? So this is where it gets tricky. And I'm sharing this information knowing that not all of you have access to all of these experts. And that's a challenge, right? If you are a professional who would like to become an expert in one of these areas, that is then something you will work on. If you are a parent who is looking for experts in these areas, I mean, the pandemic has made a lot of virtual learning more possible. There are consultations and we can do a lot. But I think a teacher of deaf and hard of hearing students or a special educator could serve as the expert on listening and language and literacy and academic development. The speech language pathologist who has training in listening, speech, and language development can be the expert in this area. The mainstream teacher or the special educator, again, of a school can provide insight on reading and math and such. And the pediatric or the educational audiologist can continue to support in the area of hearing and hearing access. I know that the current state is that not everyone has access to everything. And just so you know that it is also the case in the US in some rural areas. I was a mainstream support teacher for children in rural Tennessee where there weren't any teachers of the deaf. So I was working with the special educator and the mainstream teacher to support the children. And that can be done. That's not impossible. But, like 20, 30 years ago, this was all new in the US because not a lot of children were mainstreaming. And the many changes that we have seen since are because more children are mainstreaming, more parents and more professionals are asking for more expertise and better services and supports. And that's how the world changes. So as you are building this team and nurturing this team through continued conversations and ongoing meetings and being involved in school activities, know that hopefully you are changing the path for the next group of kids who are going to be joining the mainstream. So all of you in the audience today and those who will see this as a recording, what you are doing today is not just going to help the one child that you are working with. If this is a classroom, the strategies that work for a child with hearing loss are going to work for the other children in the class as well. It's just good teaching. If you are working with a child one-on-one, what you do for one child, what you train one teacher in a mainstream school to do, might work for a child who comes and gets admission in this school 2 years after you. So know that all of these partnerships are going to help your child, but also help many other children who come after you. And then, in 10 years, in 20 years, there might not even be a need for a webinar like this, because we are doing all the things to support children in mainstream settings. Uma Medidari, our parent cheerleader, our board member, has been instrumental in putting this webinar together. And these are her direct key considerations when developing the partnership. So tip number 1, do not overwhelm the teacher with more information than they need to know, right? I gave you a lot of topics, but make sure you are providing it piecemeal. Strive to build a strong and healthy rapport with the teacher. Your teacher is going to be, your lifeline in many ways. Be respectful, genuine in every interaction. You don't want to be that high maintenance parent or professional that the teacher wants to run away from when they see you at school. And remember, teachers will share information about you and the child in the staff room with the child's future teachers. So this really is a partnership. This really is a relationship. It will not be perfect day one, but you are going to build it over time. As I said, I've been in the field for about 20 years now. And the children that I taught 20 years ago, it wasn't all, sunshine and roses. There were tough times and there were children who really challenged how I could teach. But the relationships I have with their parents are strong to this day. And it ultimately comes down to the relationship and the partnership that you can build. And if at the very get-go, it feels like this is not a school that is going to engage in this relationship building, that's a red flag. You will choose different things over the course of the child's education, and that's fine, as long as you are responding to what the child is showing you, what the child is needing. I think this can be a wonderful partnership for all those involved. That is what we wanted to share with you today, the 5 steps, 5 considerations, 5 steps for partnership with the school, with the teacher, including the child, including the leadership. We would love to get questions and comments from you in the chat, or if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. As you are sharing your thoughts, please know that you can also share your thoughts again in the survey. We will send you a survey for this session, but we will also send you a survey to get to know what your challenges are in the mainstream, so we can develop our webinars accordingly. Our next webinar will be August 6th and 7th. So please let us know through the survey what questions you have, what topics you would like to learn about, if there are any strategies or if there are any templates like the email template I showed you that you would like to have, that maybe a video explanation of something. Tell us what will help you, and we will be happy to develop that with you and for you.